Hey there, I'm Chris Sessums, Director of Academic Affairs at D2L, and welcome to Between Two Moose, a place where we get to debate trends, topics tied to teaching and learning with technology. And today, our focus is personalized learning. This is a hot and sexy topic, as you can imagine, and with me, the man who's got science for any occasion, postulating theories, formulating equations, Ken Chapman, Vice President of Market Research at D2L. Welcome, Ken, to Between Two Moves.
Thank you, Dr. Sessums. Great to be here as usual, and such a wonderful topic to discuss today. Yes, personalized learning. There's some myths around this that exist, Chris.
There are some myths, and I have been debating personalized learning, personal learning, personalization of learning. I've been debating this for probably, it feels like decades, with my colleagues, and yet it's still an incredibly important topic. So I'm glad we have an opportunity to explore this a little bit more. And one of the myths that I want to start out with is one that you may have heard before, related to the idea that I'll say myth number one, there's no such thing as personalized learning. Is that true? Is there such thing as personalized learning?
Yeah, I haven't heard that myth as prominently, I guess. I mean, to me, all learning is personal and personalized. I mean, it's an inherently human and highly personal experience. So, I mean, while the systems that we create around learning, maybe we don't resonate with how we think about personal or personalized learning. I mean, ultimately, I think that's not a myth, and it does exist. I mean, and it exists in different forms to different degrees, where we try to optimize the system and environments we put around learners around their specific needs. And that's not just the content that we show them, but it's some of the agency that we give them and the types of learning activities they perform, how they demonstrate what they know, the support systems and learning environments and supportive environments we give them. I mean, those are all ways that learning becomes personalized. And I'm very aware of the minefield of individualized learning versus personalized learning versus differentiated. But I think at its core, personalized learning is all that exists. It's just it's in different forms. We achieve it at different levels in the way that we design our learning experiences and environments.
That's an interesting way to frame that. I've always thought of learning was very much a personal act, right? No one learns for me. I'm the only person that is learning. Right. So it's always been personal, for sure. I think one of the things that I feel like gets confused, and maybe it's in the jargon, but when we went online, personalization or personalized learning all of a sudden took on a whole new cast, right? But before we jump into the technology side, personalized learning for me has always been, I always thought of sans technology, but more of a teacher being able to go to a student and go, hey, I see you're interested in comic books. Maybe I can help you learn math through using comic books, right? Or figuring out what it is that that makes a student tick, and then trying to adapt maybe some lessons that might reach that student more. It's the way I've always thought about it. Am I missing anything with that, or?
Yeah, I think that makes sense, Chris. I mean, to me, to put, I think what you said a different way, I look at it as trying to get a wider funnel to achieve that connection or that engagement with the learner and the concepts and the skills you're trying to get them to grow, and not creating lots of little narrow lanes, for different styles for people to fit themselves in, but have everybody bring their own diversity and individuality to what you want them to learn. Absolutely.
I even, before our show, I went into Wikipedia and found there's an actual entry in Wikipedia for personalized learning.
I was there.
Which is interesting because it talks about tailoring pedagogy, curriculum, learning environments, and it says by learners or for learners in order to meet the different learning models or different learning needs and aspirations. Sorry. So that led me to start thinking, and a tip of the hat to Stephen Downes for triggering these things. Do we need to differentiate instruction according to student variables, right? There's some larger questions, I think, that are sort of behind personal learning and why we're even talking about it. Like, should students study the same subject in the same order, in the same way, or should we be varying it? You know, this raises a bunch of interesting questions I think are tied to personalized learning.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. And for those of you that just joined us, welcome to Between Two Moves. We're talking about some of the myths that persist around personalized learning today. Chris, you know, if we think about the dichotomy of how personalized learning is thought about in you know, the classroom versus with technology, I think some of the things that have gotten confused and maybe where, you know, as you said, jargon can be the culprit. You know, one of the myths I hear regularly being working at a software vendor is technology is the key to personalizing learning. And without such key, you know, it's a necessary condition. How do you react to that? How do you reset some of that expectation if someone comes to you with that myth?
You know, that's a really powerful one, an area that I think does need a lot of exploration. I mean, do we want, there's this idea that when computers are involved in personalizing learning, that they are making decisions, right? That the computer or the program or the algorithm is making decisions that we used to rely on a teacher to make, or maybe as an individual learner to make. And do we want to enable computers to make those decisions for us, or is technology a threat in this case, or can it really tailor the learning experience for us? Mm-hmm. It's a question I'm always curious about. What are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we look at, you know, really what the nature and purpose of technology typically is, you know, and look at learning technology as a tool like any other. You know, a ladder is a tool for me and extends my ability to physically reach something. Mm-hmm. I look at technology with respect to personalized learning as being that extension of my human abilities that allow me to do something at a larger scale or with a greater impact than I could have otherwise. So, for example, you know, while there may be one of me in a classroom and a limited amount of time and bandwidth to go connect with each individual learner, you know, give them a bit of opportunity in that wider funnel to engage with the learning material and assessments, I can design some of those elements into online instruction. I can take advantage of the fact that it's not a rigid sort of one size fits all model, but can allow me to bring in my own pedagogy, my own ability to embrace multiple ways of demonstrating a concept, you know, multiple ways of assessing knowledge and multiple ways of engaging with the environment itself. So, you know, I think where that myth can come from is those, you know, those claims of robot tutor in the sky and things like that, rather than, you know, an exoskeleton that the teacher or the expert is inside and manipulating with a mindful design at heart, right?
You know, Ken, that's one of the first times I've ever heard empowering the instructor, empowering the faculty member with the technology, in this case around personalization of learning. I like you mentioned, I'm used to battling the myth of the robot tutor in the sky. Oh, that'll forever live in infamy. I'm glad I wasn't the one who said that. The robot tutor in the sky is a real dilemma, I think. It's so algorithms can statistically sort of say this is the ideal path. So here's an example, one that may resonate here. So let's say, for example, we look at all the data in our school and we recognize that for incoming freshmen, we know that if they take this sequence of courses and they score at this level, then their chances of progressing and graduating on time are 80%, right? Probability, 80%. So then comes along Chris Sessums, who didn't meet the criteria of my university, was admitted on probation, right? Because I didn't have the scores. I didn't have all the requisites that they knew that statistically I had a better chance of being successful. And yet 20 years later, I'm still enrolled in school. No, I was able to be successful, but I didn't fit in the algorithm. It strikes me as the robot tutor in the sky, the thing that we should fear around technology involved in personalization is having statistical significance outweigh individual variability.
Yeah.
And that's my biggest fear.
Yeah, and I think there's a recognition of just where in the life cycle technology is. I mean, as much as we hear about artificial intelligence and AI, as a statistician by background, we're nowhere near there. If we think of a crawl, walk, and run sort of maturity model for technology, we're crawling. And no parent leaves their 1-year-old free to crawl around the house on its own. They're supervising that. And so all of these algorithms, all of this data analysis that we're creating has to be supervised. And the insights and the action that we take from it needs to be equally supervised. I think what we see in the organizations that really get it and that start to use that data to their advantage is they have agile frameworks, continuous improvement processes that take those insights and feed those into the human collective and start making good decisions around that. Mm-hmm. And it's in those types of cultures that we're going to move from that crawl to walking and running.
Well, you really warm my heart at your comments. I'm glad to hear you saying that. And the fact that I know that you work at a tech-based company focusing on human beings makes me even feel even better. If you're just joining us, welcome to Between Two Moose. I'm Chris Sessums, and with me is Ken Chapman, and we're talking about personalization of learning. And actually, we're moving into another myth that I've seen put out there, but I'd love to hear your take on it, related to the idea that you can't personalize online learning at scale. Is that true, Ken? Can you personalize learning, make it an individualized experience at scale with the hundreds and thousands maybe of students?
So yes, I think that myth can be true, but I don't think it has to be true. Mm-hmm. But I think it comes from a real recognition that the fact that you're online really has no bearing necessarily on whether you're going to be successful in personalizing that experience. It really has to do with being designed in and with a focus of the learner at the center, and the outcomes and the constraints on the types of learning program and curriculum to be created. That said, as I mentioned, I think a mindful approach of how to leverage technology to embrace the diversity of learners, create the opportunity for them not to necessarily be designers of their own learning, and to over-rotate into that model, but to have some agency into how they demonstrate what they know, the way they form and create networks within their learning circles, and how they share that learning, that reflection, that process back to demonstrate knowledge. I think those are things that can be done very, very well online and at scale. What's important to do is to break out of some of that classroom analogy mindset that seems to persist online. Everybody starting at the same time and sort of the seat time models that can persist and be rigid in online environments can absolutely be a preventative against that. Much more flexible and open sort of design models in online systems can very much support that personalization. You touched on a few things there that I want to circle back to. One of them has to do with the learner-centeredness of the experience. One of the larger questions I feel like we've been wrestling with at an institutional level around education is this idea of,
are we teaching people to be autonomous, self-directed learners, or are we teaching them to be dependent on us as an institution to tell them what to learn, when to learn, where to learn, how to learn? There's an autonomy versus control kind of issue that I feel like it is reflected in how an institution approaches these questions of using technology to support individualization. Are we empowering learners? Or are we forcing them to, no, you can't figure it out on your own, I'll do it for you? You know, I'm curious, you know, you've been presenting this as a very much learner, educator has the ability to empower the learner, wherein I don't always hear that shared in that light. So I'm always excited to hear your opinions on these topics, because you're blowing my own myth, Ken. You don't have a tradition, I'll say a conventional view of how to use, or maybe a stereotypical way of technology, you know, taking over. So I'm really encouraged.
Well, honestly, I haven't, where I've seen real transformation happening with technology, that's not how it's doing it, right? It's doing it to serve people that really understand who they're serving and their goals. Well,
serving up opportunities for learners. I mean, I feel like part of personalization could be more empowered by, and again, I'm going to steal from Stephen Downes, this idea of a grocery store analogy, wherein a university or a college or a school could be either a restaurant or a grocery store, right? It can be supplying you with all the ingredients that you can make endless numbers of meals. They might not be as strong nutritionally across the board, but you have a lot of options, wherein if I go to a restaurant, I have fixed choices. This is what I'm going to eat. Generally healthy, maybe not necessarily, but if we said all meals must be healthy, then, you know, we might have we'd be better served at a restaurant, but we would be forced into that system as opposed to having kind of individual, personalized control, right? So I'm really kind of thinking about, can we have both? Can we have a restaurant and a grocery store?
And challenge that. I was going to say, now bring that into the gig economy. And now I basically just pull up Foodoroo or whatever, and I can either have my selection of junk food from the grocery store. I can hit my favorite recipe or set menu item from a restaurant, or anything in between. So actually that understanding of, you know, how self-directed are things from a learner perspective, when all of the universe of activities and learning modalities are at their disposal, becomes that much more important. And I don't have the answer to that.
No, I think it's one that we definitely need to consider. So here's a quick, we got a question from the audience. Should we empower or engage students? Empowering them, engaging them, is one better? Is both? When we think about empowering students and engaging them, what do you think about how technology can support that?
Yeah, I think, you know, I think for me, what I mean by engaging someone is you know, where they feel like they can relate to a topic. An easy way for technology to do that is, let me record a video of my phone on something that I'm doing. Whether it's, you know, I'm looking at the architecture that's similar to what we've been hearing about, whether it's, you know, demonstrating an actual physical task. It's a simple way for me to bring some presence, some aspect of self, and to be creating. I think inherently when you're creating something, you're engaged with that activity rather than being a passive consumer. That's one of the big transformation that's happened in technology, is everybody is a creator, and we take that for granted at this point. But it's not always taken for granted in a learning activity model.
You're right about that. I got really stoked and focused on this sort of prosumer model when I was going through my own sort of teacher training, with the idea of being both a producer and a consumer of knowledge and learning, and trying to unpack that with my students. One of the things that I always, to keep students engaged, whether at scale or in a small group, is to, like you said, if you want to keep people engaged, give them problems to work that are relevant to their lives, or tackle larger social issues that we all recognize as being valuable and that need the kind of attention that we should be spending on it, like defining personalized learning, what we should be doing. So it looks like we're coming about up to our time. Ken, are there any other thoughts that you have as we come to the close of our time together today?
I think there's a lot more to talk about on personalized learning. I think an interesting thing for us to think about is how that shifts in someone's lifelong learning career. You know, how they go from being a participant in a well-structured track for themselves to being out in the open space of their career, and having to navigate that self-directed learning problem. I'd love to explore that more with you, Chris.
That's a fantastic idea. You know, I want to talk about this too, Ken, this idea that for some reason learning stops after we graduate. We tend to discount so much of what is called sometimes informal learning, but this is all connected without a doubt. Well, listen, we've come to the end of our time today. On October 17th, don't miss us when we'll be discussing what to do when the party is over and how to keep students excited and engaged after October. So we should be, well, it's October 17th is around the time that EDUCAUSE is happening. So if you're in town, D2L will be at EDUCAUSE in Chicago, so be sure and look for us there. But thanks again, Ken, for your time, and for folks that have tuned in, thank you for your time. This has been Chris Sessums with Ken Chapman, Between Two Moose, and we'll see you again next month.